Alrighty, hello everybody and welcome to something brand new on this channel that was not of my making, but somebody has brought up to me. And this is going to be the first of many episodes known as Gloving Table Talks. Everybody should know who I am. I am Peter, aka LPD, the Bio Guy, and the host of the Gloving channel known as the Gloving Paradigm. And with me, two people coming back and one new person. So everybody should remember McKinley, aka Starstream TuT from the Pit Battles video, and everybody should also remember Josh, aka Steamboy from my lovely interview, being one of my first interviews. And of course, our new person with me is Dustin, aka Snaps. So before we get started into all the crazy stuff that we want to talk about, we're just going to do a quick little introduction for each and every person that's here now. So that way everybody who's watching this will know who they are, and going forward, you know who they are. So, McKinley, you want to start off first?
Oh, so I'm like this guy that gloves. Yeah.
Very subtle.
What a coincidence.
Yeah, y'all should know me because I run the Worldwide Glovers Discord server and community, and just trying to help expand that and use that as a platform to get people to spread the art throughout many social media platforms, not just one spot. But yeah, that's what I do. Josh.
Everyone, my name's Josh. I go by Steamboy. I hail from Maryland. I help run the DMV community. It's a tri-state of DC, Maryland, Virginia. And within gloving, I focus a lot on cinematic project videos and just other cool little weird things going on in that world. So hope you guys are having a good day. Hope you guys enjoy.
And my name's Dustin, aka Snaps. I'm the newest glover here, the least amount of experience. Maybe I think in February it will be 4 years that I would have been 3 years, 3 years that I've been introduced to gloving, but I've only really been gloving for like going on 2 years. I'm from the DMV area too, but I learn a lot through Worldwide Glovers and Facebook and so on.
Yeah, so pretty much we just gathered a nice little troop of people who have varying different backgrounds and different experiences within the gloving community, because it was kind of formulated by not only Dustin but also Josh, and they kind of brought it up to my attention that they wanted to do something like this. And this, of course, has been something I've been wanting to do for a while, is actually have other people on here from different backgrounds, from different time points within the gloving community, to talk about their experiences and their knowledge within the gloving community as a whole. And as my dog goes crazy and trying to get my attention, I'm trying to work. Yeah, so I think I'm the one that has the most experience at 11 years, and then it goes McKinley, right?
And even then, it's like, I think we all have still very unique perspectives.
Right.
You have 11 years. I want to say you've also had more in-person and Glover's Lounge interaction. Because I've been around since about 2011. But I didn't know about the lounge until 2017.
Gotcha.
You know? So I have more of a dance view.
Right.
And then, Josh, when did you first get active in it?
So this will be my 10th year. So.
Okay, so 10th year. Well, what about on the online scene?
I mean, that depends, because like before I did Glover's Lounge, I was on Throw Lights, like back when it was like a forum and not like a commerce, product selling website, like.
Interesting.
Yeah, I actually remember Throwlights being a kind of forum website rather than a company now.
Right.
So it was but that was a thing before Glover's Lounge?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, at least to my knowledge.
From whenever you first you interacted with us first.
Right.
We don't know when I guess we can honestly go look and see when the group was made.
It was actually made in 2011. It was actually founded in 2011. I actually went and double checked because that's part of my gloving history that I'm working on. In the third installment, that's going to be about IGC, Boss, like when the competitive scene really actually was formulated and why it was formulated, because it was all pretty much a response to the whole gloving ban in EDC LA 2010. That's why there's a competitive
right.
scene. It's because we wanted to show this detachment away from the stigma that we have cultivated from the rave scene, which makes sense. Anything that comes out of the rave scene is going to have the rave scene stigma to it. You know.
Yeah. That's just gonna be there because of the possibility, you know. But even so, it's up to, you know, the ones who are pioneering things to really voice and really lead it in that space and really just give example of how we're changing that, or how not everyone is like that, and how especially that person isn't, you know.
Right.
I feel like there's a lot of push and code sales and like skill and competition, but there's not a lot of people that are like, hey, everyone just flow to flow.
Right.
You know, there's not a lot of that. It's all like, hey, yo, this is my badass move. Like, yeah, I think it's all cool, but you think that one specifically is badass.
I think that's actually the perfect segue into like the overarching theme for what we want to talk about today, which is the current state of gloving. Right?
Yeah.
So I guess I know that between the four of us, Josh actually might have the least insight on the current state of gloving, because what he knows is strictly like at this point what we've talked about and maybe within the last year.
Right. I basically took like a year-long hiatus from just using the internet in general. So when I came back, there were a bunch of things that I just missed out on. So yeah, if you guys want to lead with that, yeah, you might guess.
So yeah, McKinley or Peter, what would you guys say, or how would you guys feel about the current state of gloving?
It's funny because I remember somebody, I couldn't even find the post. It's buried within Glover's Lounge, but I remember somebody asking a very similar question about the current state of affairs of gloving. And one of the things that I spoke about in my post on that, or my comment I should say, was it's not as much as like gloving is dying or like falling apart. It's just in a lull where you just are not getting a whole huge flood of new blood coming into the hobby. And this is something that I actually kind of took point from like how D&D was. To anyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons, 4th edition is what they called their lulling point, where just not a whole lot of people were coming into the hobby. Older people really hated it. New people couldn't understand it and was having a hard time getting into the game because of it. And then they came out with 5th edition, and then they had this deluge of new players into the game. So that's where I feel like it's kind of happening with gloving right now, is particular points that happen within the past 5-6 years, I would say, is cause this lulling where we just don't get a whole lot of new people into the hobby. And there's multiple factors that you have to take into account from where I stand and understand from watching the gloving community grow and evolve from the earliest days. I find it kind of crazy that McKinley hasn't heard about Glover's Lounge until 2017, knowing about gloving since 2011, because there was a lot of talk through Amazing Lights about Glover's Lounge through their videos and stuff like that. So it's kind of like baffling to me that he didn't know about it.
Yes, and like I see. I can't even think of an example of when they ever explicitly talked about the lounge.
I agree.
Not even once.
I'm sure they've mentioned it in passing, but I've never seen them.
Even on their website, you know, they have their Find a Community thing. Doesn't have any GL, none of that. Matter of fact, you could barely find communities near you.
Oh, the GGN, the Global Gloving Network.
It never. I don't know how, again, because I wasn't there. I don't know how they were doing it, but I felt like they just could have done it better.
Right. So, in my opinion, with all of that, and I'm gonna have to talk about like the Amazing Lights like Monopoly thing, you know, because as much as I don't want to, but I can kind of, on the one hand, I can kind of see what they were trying to do, right? Because it's like to nurture and to basically socially engineer a culture is very, very difficult, right? And what they want. They had a very specific idea and vision on what they wanted that culture to look like. But the fact of the matter is that by basically getting to the top, because they are still, regardless of how you look at it from like our perspective as people who are like deep in the scene, but like from a more general perspective, they are still like the biggest company in the game. But to have all of that responsibility and all of those projects on just one company is still a lot, because Amazing is big for a gloving company, but in the grand scheme of things, compared to other hobbies, compared to like, just other companies, they are somewhere between a small business and like a large corporation. Like they're
someone trying to make it.
Right. They're still kind of in that middle ground.
They're alive.
I mean, they're
living comfortably.
Yeah, they're giant within a tiny bubble. Like, that's what happened. You put the entire gloving community in the small bubble within the macrocosm of business, and corporate business, corporate America. They blew up in retrospect of scaling. Like, you look at like a 1.5 scale to like 1 out of 10 scale. Like, here's the marketing world, here's Amazing Lights and the gloving community. Like, they blew up, and it was like a big deal within business forums and stuff like that. But when you actually like look at the scaling of how much money they were pulling in compared to Fortune 500 companies, yeah, it was still a very micro little bubble scale thing. But still, a lot of people took note of that. It was just like they really spearheaded and dominated the entire marketing on gloving itself.
Right, but it's like because of that, because they basically put themselves up here, they were trying to do all this stuff like GGN that just never really took off, because GGN was like a great idea. And they
spread them too thin.
Yeah, exactly. They spread themselves too thin, and like they had all these projects like that, like what's it called? The Glover's Hall of Fame rankings. They had projects such as like really like if you look at it, the one project that in my mind that comes immediately to me that is still around is Face Melt Crew, and that's really only because a lot of that is purely community based.
And even then, another day.
I was gonna say, all right, hot take moment from McKinley. McKinley, explain why you got your face, man. Yeah.
Oh, dude. So just from what you just said, from doing the math, I feel like they kept cutting people from like their business, like it's like actual like staff. Like, that's why they had stores all over, but then they kept shutting the stores down.
Right.
And
yeah, I think they had 3 altogether.
Online, but none of the deals in store.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, thinking about Face Melt, like, there's 2 people ran it, and those same 2 people basically ran, like, all the marketing and all the other stuff for everything else, right? So it's like they don't hardly have a staff, and they're spreading themselves too thin doing all these things, and they're actually getting paid, and it's still not that great. That's the problem. They don't.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They're not actually growing. They're just capitalizing.
Right. Like, so I work for a small business right now. In fact, most of my adult life, I've worked for small businesses, right? So it's like really like, despite how much money they're supposedly like getting in, despite like their outward persona of being this really successful company, like really like their actual like operation size appears pretty small. And it's like, because of that, it's like, going back full circle, they're just spreading themselves too thin when, we could have had these other companies that, also in collaboration, kind of like boosting each other up, kind of like saying like, oh, you're interested in this, like focus on that.
Dumb ego stuff in between all that.
Right. I don't even want to start going down that rabbit hole, but right. But I feel like that leads to the other side of it. Like looking at the rest of the gloving companies that I've seen, and like kind of like people that I've talked with, it's like a lot of these companies have good intentions, but it's like they don't have the capital, they don't have like the resources, and it's like again, I've worked with a lot of small businesses, just in my professional life, and it's like the one thing that differs from them and like gloving companies is that a lot of people do gloving businesses as really a side gig. They want
eventually.
Right. But it's like that's not where they are now, and because of that, yeah, like right. And it's like because they can't focus on growing it like that, and because the gloving niche is really small, like people who are dedicated to it and not just like casual about it, is so small. Is like the economic pool, just there isn't enough resource even to grab from it to be able to do a lot of the big things that we collectively as a community want to do.
Which is why, as a whole, though, especially in this past year, I feel in the current state of living, that we're adding wealth to the art form as a whole. We're actually giving weight to the information. We're actually giving it currency. Like it has literal. It's not just
right. Once you're putting a monetary value, like a physical
monetary
value, as opposed to like
that's the word value.
as opposed to just like a intellectual value or even artistic value, like having artistic appreciation. It does something to the hobby. Like once you start capitalizing on a hobby in whatever way, because like I think we could all agree that like monetization of like gloving lessons and stuff, because it's, you know, everyone's looked at old YouTube videos of like how to do a finger roll, whatever, right? But now it's like, you know, you can take these courses that allow for newer glovers to, that allows for them to like really pick up the art further, right? And it's like I said, it does something interesting to it because it allows for the information to be accessible, but then also more personable in terms of the learning experience. But then other people could say that like paying for lessons and stuff could, it like feels weird, because some people will have strong opinions on like, oh,
Right.
like, why would you pay X amount of dollars to learn about this? And then it's like, why does it matter?
It's like that up until the next step goes. So,
Yeah.
all right. So we don't. Right now, we're trying to find, like in Poi, you have like your Drex Factor, you have your Play Poi. Right now, we're in that point of establishing the gloving variant. Like you got Sergio, you got Lucy Drop, you got Freeze. Steamboy's put out some stuff. I put out some stuff. Peter puts out plenty of stuff. You know. So right now,
Merc was doing it well with the gloving nucleus. You know, so I mean, Puppet did a couple episodes as well.
Yeah, it's like there's plenty, but no one's been consistent as much as Peter.
As much as Peter, yeah.
So as soon as if people like latch onto that, I think they will eventually. Just like Drex. Drex had a long tech vlog before he really like started getting blown up. So we're at that point, I feel, and once we have that general acceptance amongst people that have like this resource that they just all go refer to, then you'll see a lot more people. The standard will rise, and then, you know, lessons increase, etc.
Right.
Workshops, etc.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what Dustin said, I've heard people talk about it from both sides. I've had some people think, you know, gloving lessons are really good for like the economy and for like the community engagement, like more stuff for them to engage with, right, and to grow faster. But I've also heard, you know, some of my friends who've been gloving as long as I have, as long as some of us have, like 10, 12 years, that like, why would you ever pay for gloving, right? And it's like, really, in my opinion, it like both are correct. Yeah, both. I mean, in my opinion, both are kind of correct, because some people will literally just pick up gloving and they'll just get it. They don't need lessons, right? But some people, they want to get it, but it's like they need that extra like push, that extra like voice to kind of like help like figure out the perspective elements, to get the kinesthetic elements like just tuned just right in their heads to like actually figure it out. The way that I kind of saw it was like back when I, you know, was younger, I was still trying to figure out my thing before gloving. I used to take guitar lessons, you know, and because I didn't have like a natural understanding of how this thing worked, and taking those lessons, you know, it didn't make me great or nothing, but it helped me definitely to a place where I get it more than I did, you know. And I feel like it's like what I always say to Dustin. It's like just because something is there doesn't take away from the fact that this other thing can't exist. So it's like, if you do need those lessons, it's there for you. If you don't need them, just ignore it. Like it's not hurting anyone.
Precisely.
You know,
It's a resource.
right.
I would also say it's kind of.
I would say that it's a matter of perspective.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's really a generational thing when it comes to gloving. So, like me, who's started the very early days, I understand from the old heads mentality of why would you pay somebody to learn this stuff when you can just learn it from tutorials. People don't learn the same way. Tutorials that were put out during my starting careers was like a professor doing a class for over 100 people. Only a certain percentage of people are actually going to get it. The other certain percentage of people are just not going to get it, and they actually have to have a different approach. And a lot of the times, it's always a one-on-one conversation that's going to make somebody understand. There's this, just like how gloving is a very one-on-one experience, a very intimate experience, teaching it kind of reflects that in the same way, because you have to show them all these different angles, and you just have to kind of like show how their hands are supposed to be in place and things like that. And that works a lot better on a one-to-one basis rather than one person standing in a lecture hall trying to preach to 250 kids,
Right, and for, like, let's be honest, a lot of us are, like, kind of in our 20s to 30s, right? Like, we're busy people. We got a lot of time. Like, I'm sure a lot of people would love to just, like, give these lessons out for free, but it's not really always a matter of, like, what they want to do, but it's about, like, realistically what time and money they have. So by paying for those lessons, you are, like, it's kind of an incentive for them to be able to actually do this. You know what I mean? Like, their time is, like, being valued. Exactly.
I'm like, I don't know if you're like, no, you're gonna, like, no doubt say make sure you have an objective for said lesson. Make sure you learn this and you understand this.
Right, because oftentimes, like, if you're just trying to lab, like, with a friend, oftentimes, like, you guys will go into tangents. You guys will, because it's it's casual, but by sticking money for a lesson, you guys are there for, like, a clear goal, and you guys know that 45 minutes to an hour is going to be used with focus.
There's also a play of ego in this whole thing, in the sense that, like, with the old head mentality, they would think, oh wait, you didn't learn it the way I learned it, therefore you're inferior. That's, like, oh, I pause, play, memorized, learn how to learn this. Someone just told you that. So, like, it's like they'll think that you have, like, a leg up on them, and it's like a little bit of envy.
Yeah. I will certainly say, from my experience when I was teaching people in, like, 2012, 2013 era, like, teaching my younger brother and one of my close friends how to do it, and them picking up on the things that took me months to figure out, yeah, I was a little, salty about it, but then I just came to realize it's not them just being better at it than me, I'm really good at teaching it, that way they were able to pick it up very quickly, and I definitely agree. It is very much you didn't earn that knowledge as well as I did with the play pause mentality. Because yeah, that's how I learned. But YouTube has advanced as a platform. Like, you have play speed changes now that you can actually drop it down to like 0.25, so it, like, really plays slowly. Like, you don't have the archaic draconian ways anymore. And I think it's weird that there are so many old heads in the community that, like, are ironclad to the draconian ways, and it's like, no, gloving has evolved with technology as well. You need to also adapt to that change.
Right, because the way that I see it is, like, one thing that I think is great about the current state of gloving is that, like, within our last couple of years, we have finally figured out, like, the technical foundations of the art, right? And it's like we've got, and, like, people are always saying, like, oh, this kid's only a year in, but he's that good, right? It's because we, not only through, like, the natural progress of technology just outside of gloving, but also, like, with people's knowledge already in the community, like, we've been able to help these people get to that point of base foundations much quicker, much faster.
RJ is a great example of this.
Right. And, like, looking at people like RJ, he got those foundations unlocked very quickly, and then he just went with it and discovered his own style, and he's just like...
He kept saying no to everyone who would tell him to do finger rolls. He's like, no.
Right. But that's what I mean. It's like we have the foundations now, and I think we're in an interesting place where hopefully within the next 5-6 years, as long as collectively as a community we don't get complacent and we get like a real driving force with new people coming in, we can really start to like take those foundations and have people actually create diversified styles. Not that they don't already exist, but take those ideas and really start to dive deep into those rabbit holes, you know?
Yeah.
Perspective always going to be there, because if one exists, the other has to exist. You know,
Yeah.
so it's like some people, they just don't like structure, and I feel like when we just start doing that, like they just rather they want to just free flow it and figure it out versus having it all do it this way, try it this way. Like they want to just find it themselves.
Right. And that's the thing, though. It's kind of like what I said before, like with the lessons. I would never want to take away either options away from people. Both ways are valid and can bring very different results that are both very cool. You might have a preference for one or the other, but you know, it's art.
Yeah. Which, speaking of like changing and adapting, I think that is actually a good way to segue into like the next topic of not as much as just Facebook with gloving and why it's not working for gloving anymore, but just social media and gloving. Like what is the discourse now when it comes to the current state of gloving? And to me, at least my experience or seeing it online, old heads like me have a hard time jumping on a new platform. It's just because we spent so much time and investment on, for a great example, Facebook, that we don't want to jump over to a new platform. And I feel really dumb for being one of those people that were in that same camp. Because to me, it's just like, I don't really like social media as it is, because it's just a trolling mediocrity of tedium. But just opening up a new official Gloving Paradigm account on Instagram and putting my content on there, I'm already seeing more new glovers, like people I know that I can tell from their skill level that they're not very experienced and well versed within the art form. And it came to my realization, it's like, oh, it's not like no one's really coming in, they're just elsewhere that we're not looking.
Right.
I want to jump the question off to you guys. What do you guys think about these different platforms? Like, which ones do you feel are the best? Because my opinion, I feel like when it comes to at least copyright stuff, Reddit and YouTube are the safest bets, because you don't really have to worry as much about DMCA, especially on Reddit. YouTube will only take your ad revenue away from you when you use copyrighted material, majority of the time. If it's a Warner or Sony copyright, they'll take it down, but most of the time you just get demonetized. What do you guys think about that?
Well, it's interesting because like I've talked to Josh about it before, and it's like back when gloving was more so in its infancy, right? The way that you would access any resources or any light shows was like you specifically had to look on YouTube. You had to know what you were looking for, or someone would send you a YouTube link or be like, hey, search up this and that, and you'll find this show the 4th video down. And like, even though like Facebook as a platform is not the greatest, the reason why I think it's not the greatest is more so like human nature. Because I personally believe that like Facebook is a great platform in terms of staying connected with other glovers. Like Glover's Lounge has what, 27,000 people in it, and anyone can choose to interact with your shows and stuff. But the discussion comes in of like, you know, how do these targeted ads and how do algorithms affect the kind of, I guess, exposure or visibility that a person might want. Like, say Joe Schmo goes and posts his first light show in Glover's Lounge, right? Some people might see it and it might blow up. Some people might not see it and it gets lost forever. And that's because Facebook as a platform is operated poorly. But Facebook as a platform for gloving, I think, is great.
Yeah, so for me, one thing I definitely noticed after a year of coming back to Facebook, like I basically just spent an entire year just like playing full monk, right? That the app at least is much glitchier than it used to be. Like the infrastructure just feels like it's kind of falling apart almost. I don't know if you guys notice the same thing, but I certainly have.
It feels like a crumbling platform in that regard.
First.
But I will certainly say I did not think about how Dustin put it as a way of staying connected with other Glovers. And once he put that perspective in my eyes, now I actually see that. I'm like, you know what? That actually makes a little bit more sense.
Stay really well connected.
Right.
It's like you can't stay that well connected on like Instagram. You can't really have I can't do a post somewhere on Instagram and expect to have the same kind of discussion that you could on Facebook. Like it's not the same because there isn't a true hub. There isn't a hub because Glovers Lounge is set up kind of like a forum.
Right.
And that's kind of what we need, which is why Reddit could work. But I'm not sure why. I think it's the stubbornness of like moving, because you can't expect to move even half of the people in GL to Reddit. You know, that's a lot of people. 13,000 people.
Right. And also, you're asking people to learn.
Yeah, learn an entirely new platform too. It's people don't even like to learn gloving concepts as it is. Like, I don't like learning.
Yeah, I think
I
that
do.
in a lot of ways, what you talked about was like, you know, right on the head, because, you know, I think about, for example, Twitter. So apparently there is a pretty sizable, if not like big, like gloving subsect on Twitter. There are people definitely posting on there and like getting like a lot of attention, especially from people outside of our community. But the problem is that Twitter, communication wise, is very, very limited. You can only do like X amount of characters, whereas on Facebook, I think one thing that really helped cultivate the technique there was the fact that we could have these long discussions, these discourses where people can chime in and have these sub discussions. And for that, it's great. I think one of the big issues though, and this is kind of a tangent, but I think it's related, is that Facebook is inherently a closed ecosystem. Like if you don't have an account, you can't interact with a lot of the stuff that's going on there.
You only get a preview of it. You only get like a taste of it.
Right. And for something like Glover's Lounge, where because it's a closed group, you have to inherently know that it exists, or you had to actively do your research and seek something out in that regard to be able to even find it. And I think that's been one of the biggest reasons why gloving has stagnated, is because we, like, within the Facebook Glover's Lounge community, we have spent all this time, like, you know, basically in the hyperbolic time chamber. And now I think we're basically trying to find a way to leave so that other people can see what we're doing and introduce this art form to other people.
I've always thought of it like a magic clubhouse. Well, the minute I heard about the lounge, I was like, yo, so you mean to tell me all the tutorials, they all went in here?
Right.
All the information, everything went into this little Facebook group that no one knows about. Because even like all the tutorials, like you were saying, I have to search up word for word, tunnel tutorial, stuff like that. And you have to just learn the terminology.
Right.
With Instagram, unlike Facebook, you don't have that discourse, but now it's just up to presentation and like purpose of the post. So like if you post like a picture or like a video, just how to do this, and you're like doing it in like a GIF, you know, it's way more to the point. Because like Instagram was like, you know, it's an instant gram of dopamine. That's how I see it.
Right.
You get like you have to get them in like a minute. So real to the
Gram
point.
of dopamine seems like a lot.
It's totally what it is, dude.
It seems like a lot.
That's why it's just a constant flood of oh my god.
Yeah,
aesthetic.
Yeah, instant gratification. The other thing I will say as well is like when it came to like Amazing Lights talking about Glover's Lounge, it was mostly in their ads on Facebook. So
it was already an isolated
Right.
system that they had for their marketing.
Right.
yeah, but it wasn't like Amazing Lights was running Glover's Lounge. They would just be like, hey, you want here flash sale 40% off, you know, and then it's just like, want to learn more about gloving? Check out the Facebook group, the community-based Facebook group Glover's Lounge. Like that's how it would be mentioned by Amazing Lights.
They're capitalizing on a setting that's available to them.
Yeah, but if I remember correctly, they had a sponsor who was the founder of Glover's Lounge. Then that's why I guess they were kind of advertising it as well. 'Cause it's like that was our sponsor. Yeah.
He was a sponsor. I didn't know that.
They had a
You
lot
see
of sponsors back then.
So I guess the thing that happens here is that like what gloving as an art form needs then is like that perfect median between a platform that's like Facebook that allows for good conversation and discourse, and I guess people like this kind of like closed off group mentality for the most part because it's like this fake safeness that they have.
I was
But
just
then
going
we
to say, I have
also-
another point that I want to ask you guys, but keep going.
But then we also need a platform that is like Instagram that is relatively easy to navigate and all the information is out in the open. And it's just like finding a platform that exists like that. I feel like is hard because it's like when you have one, it's like you can't have the other, in a sense. Like even if we go on Reddit, right? Reddit is still is more so like Facebook, but it's in the open. But it's not necessarily as ease of use as Instagram in terms of like, oh, I want to look up
No
a tutorial
picture.
on how to do
Therefore, I
figure.
can't
Yeah,
see.
there's no pictures.
I gotta read.
Dude, you're telling me
Yeah.
I can't
Oh,
read, so. But yeah, it's just finding a platform that exists like that, or even someone creating a platform like that. I feel like is what we would want ideally as a gloving community, but is something that currently doesn't exist to my knowledge.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's like looking at all of these different platforms that do exist. It's like all of them, no matter what, are gonna have their pros and cons, right? I think if anything, what matters most right now is having enough people kind of within like the established base willing to do stuff outside of Facebook. Like for example, I know that right. Like I feel like for me personally, my biggest interest is YouTube. Like I have like an
Well,
interest
isn't
in doing-
YouTube starting to bring up like a forum style platform on?
Oh, it's literally all
Right.
of them all at once. That you can post pictures with your thing. You can
Communities tabs.
short videos. Yeah, you have full long videos. You can do pretty much everything except write a status. And even then, I think you can kind of
No, you can
You
write a
can-
status.
you
Yeah.
can now.
The community tab adds the whole status thing, and that's where a lot of people actually see a lot more interaction with their audience is through their community tabs.
The important thing is, can you form a group and have a like basically a corralled community on YouTube? Because I feel like that is what needs to exist in order for glovers to stay together, or for a new glover to know where to go. You know, because if everyone walks out by themselves, they're not going to know what direction to go, right? There has to be somewhere to go in order to like access the community, access the tutorials, or access any kind of discussion. There has to be a place that exists for it, right?
I think Discord's pretty close. People just
I
have
do
to
think-
hop in a voice chat. If in case they can't read, they just hop in a voice chat and we'll tell you.
I do think that Discord is also a close way.
It's
For
connected
it.
to everything.
Yeah, because it is connected to everything.
We're
And it-
here, aren't we?
I
And that's
think-
the interesting thing.
Yeah, go on.
I do think that Discord does provide like a very close representation of like what we want in terms of the amount of connectivity, the amount of discussion, but then also the amount of like I guess like structure, because I would say that Instagram is what represents the structure, right? Ease of use and structure. Discord is really close. Discord is really
I would say
close.
I think
so.
they're slowly perfecting it themselves.
Right. I think that the big thing with Discord for me that is its biggest drawback right now is the fact that like everything is very utilitarian, if that makes sense. Like if you look at like most Discord servers, they have done a lot on the back end, making sure that people who are running servers have all the tools they need to be able to set up a server how they want. I think their biggest thing now is to give those server admins the ability to manipulate things on a front end point of view, because I feel like if you're not used to Discord, and even me, like when I look at a bigger Discord like WWG, it all makes sense. I see the intentionality there, right? But it's still a bit like every time I look at it, I get a little bit frazzled for a second, and then like I have to like really read it.
Something to take note of. You also have many roles from your overall interaction here. Every time you level up, you gain things. So when you first hop in here, you only see like 4 things.
Yeah. Whenever you look, it's at least the way that this server is set up specifically. Every chat room has locks on it, except for like a couple, and the locks, like you're able to see the ones that have locks as you gain roles.
If I were to screen share what all is actually in here, you'd probably be pretty mind blown.
No,
how big?
I'm sure.
I was gonna say, if I remember, I think mine is very close to what you see, McKinley, and there is a lot. But there's also good reasons, because you're trying not to only be, bottlenecking yourself with just like, no, this is only Glovers and stuff like that. Like, you want people to be like, hey, if they're interested in any other form of flow art, we have those resources available. You just gotta start asking the questions and start interacting to get to those points.
Actually, Peter.
Yeah.
Based on that, if you don't mind me like asking somewhat of a segue question.
Okay.
We talked earlier about the fact that like within the past couple of years, like we laid out like a proper foundation for gloving, because I was talking to like a couple Orbit friends, right, and they all said like they said quote like we're kind of like a step or two behind where you guys are at as glovers. Like we are still figuring out our foundational stuff. Like we're close, but we're still figuring out. But I feel like figured out our foundational stuff. So like from there, where do you guys see things going? Because it's also within the conversation of like current state of gloving. Where are we looking ahead?
So for me, from my perspective, the way I've been looking at it is that we have our foundations, right? We got all the basics, all the fundamental movements and move sets that you need to understand that propagate styles, and as I call them, archetypes, between any form of manual light manipulation, which we call conjuring, to impacting, to teleporting, to even phasing. But not only that, but trying to propagate just different movement styles altogether. Like platforming is a really good example of that. Morphing, another great example of not what your lights are doing, but what you're doing with your moves and how you bring it all together. That's where I feel gloving needs to start moving towards, at least with a lot of the people who are very well experienced. People who want to share their personal takes on a style like morphing or platforming, for that example, would be able to actually make up and expand new movesets as time goes on. Morphing is probably the greatest example of that when it comes to watching a style evolve when gloving evolves itself. It was very flow based in the very, very beginning, very intentional repetitions of movements, and then you go into the first renaissance of gloving era, and we have much more technical approach to the style, where they actually incorporate more tech-based concepts, more tutting concepts, and actually still maintain this aesthetic that propagated from the first iteration of that style. Platforming has also gone through a couple iterations of itself, where it actually learns how to manipulate more force perspective and more causal sequencing. I honestly say, if platforming did not exist, we would not have causal sequencing down the way that we do as a community. Which is cause and effect. If to anyone who doesn't know what I mean by causal sequencing, and it's those kinds of things that I feel like other communities, like the Orbit community, for example, would need to start doing. If they know their fundamental movesets, now they need to start defining and refining their styles and what they know as styles within the Orbit community, whether it be an impacting style or a conjuring style, a morphing style, a platforming style, a teleporting style. Whatever they come up with their terminology, they need to just start having those conversations and actually start putting it down on paper, so when people such as like Dustin coming in and like a year to 2 years in, there's all these resources that they can find. Like McKinley freaked out when I told him that there's a morphing lounge Facebook group to learn about morphing. You're just like, wait, that exists? I'm like, yeah, you didn't know about it? He's like, no. which also kind of brings the next thing up, where it's just telling people and sharing that information out there and trying to constantly put that information out there that, yeah, there are resources out there, and not go figure it out on your own, have fun, you swim with the sharks type deal. Like that, I hate that mentality.
How do you morph? Never mentions morphing lounge.
Well, it's like as a new Glover, it's like a thing that I noticed that I feel like is always gonna be a deterrent from gloving either progressing, advancing, or like becoming more popular, is how gatekeepy it can be.
My ego. Hold on.
Yeah, like there's so many things where it's like, yeah, sorry, it's just a secret or whatever, and it's like, I feel like that's a problem because it's an art form that is based around expression, but then you don't want to express it to me more specifically.
Inspired by you?
Like, you're telling me that I'm not allowed to learn your thing, but then if I try to learn the thing on my own, you just all you tell me is that I'm doing it wrong.
I don't know. And some people just can't do it. I don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean, some people can't do it, and that like that's the nature of like doing anything, because sometimes you can't. Like sometimes it just doesn't fit how your body or how your brain works or whatever. But I feel like that isn't relevant to someone who wants to try and learn, and then you just telling them, like anyone just telling them no. And it's, I don't know.
So
like
here's the next question then.
Says that it's, you know.
Well, I was gonna say, well, here's the next question. What do you guys think about public visibility, like public groups and private groups? Because if you guys remember a few months ago, pit battles went public, just randomly, just, I don't know, the Facebook gods just say, hey, guess what, your group, now public. Just, bloop, there you go, people can see you now. And people lost their minds. Like, people were like, I don't want people seeing what I post in here, because they don't want their trash talking to be visible to family, co-workers, whatever the case may be, which I just find completely ridiculous, because if anyone is actually searching for that stuff, they'll be able to find it regardless if it's in a private group or not. You know what I mean? That if you're toxic in a private group, you're going to be toxic in public groups. Even if you try to be as professional as possible, you know, there's going to be traces of your toxicity in your public postings. So, where do you guys stand on that?
This is my character, though.
So, basically, I think that I would have much preferred something a lot more open to start. Well, there are several ways to look at it, right? I mean, by keeping it closed, there is something to be said about like maintaining a status quo. And I feel like for a lot of people, I'm not speaking for everyone, of course, right? I'm speaking for some people do keep gloving private. Like the fact that they glove private. Like, for example, I've met people who keep it private because of their work. Like, they work for the military or they work for the government. And it's just something that, you know, they don't want to get into because of the stigma around gloving being like a whole, like, you know, rave subculture in and of itself. And there's also people like who want to keep gloving private because they've been picked on for it. I remember when I was growing up, 16, 17 in high school, when I first got into it, a lot of people were not cool with it. Like, a lot of my friends, for example, thought it was really lame and really stupid, which is why, like, you don't see me hanging out with those friends now, for example. So, you know, there is an element to that, but also I think that in terms of progression, I think it's good that we do open up. But it's one of those things that people like us as an established community, you know, figure out a way to be able to bring in those new people, open those floodgates, right? But also be able to make sure that we keep like a lot of the more positive tenets of what gloving is at its heart. Because, you know, all four of us have had bad experiences as glovers within this community. Like, you know, we've had some people pull some dumb shit. We've had people troll and like be assholes about it and then see you in real life and say it was just a troll, bro. Like, and you just see people like having huge egos about it. But I think that all four of us can also agree that we've also met some wonderful people here, right? And I think that that element for people, once we actually decide like community-wise to open up those floodgates to make sure like those tenets, like those values are the ones that are pushed most, and to be able to check these new people and be like, that doesn't jive here. Like, you need to cut that shit out if you're gonna stay. Like, that's just how it is. I think it's just a matter of like the people who are here making sure what's important.
So before we go too further, I'm gonna connect back to the other one and connect back to this one. So one of the things I wanted to say about presentation when it comes to gloving is the next thing that's gonna happen is, you have dancing and gloving is slowly becoming more prevalent. Flow between that is becoming more prevalent, and VR gloving is becoming more prevalent. So moving that into this, you're gonna have, you want options for everything. Pit battles is private, and people want to be fake toxic in there and like not in real life, whatever. The thing is, you need to have the option for everybody, so they have a place to go. It's like control chaos. That way, chaos is spreading everywhere. It's right there.
Right.
You have to allow it to exist.
I honestly think, at least, I think the mentality that a lot of people have about pit battles being a toxic place, it's actually being dispelled with how it's being ran now, and how the interaction, that's the word I was looking for, between people in pit battles is not as toxic as people are being led to believe. You know what I mean? Because you watch my
shut the shit down.
Yeah, you watch my Let's Watch pit battles, and you're not really seeing that kind of toxicity being portrayed there. It's actually being portrayed in a much more positive light, in my opinion, because it's showing there's a level of sportsmanship with it, but it's not bound within a competition setting. It's actually entertainment, and it's actually being shown like this is entertainment, just like how WWE wrestling is this entertainment value, not an actual Olympic sport type thing where there's stats and stuff like that. It's just people construct their own narratives and create a story for their audience to embark on. You know what I mean? That's why, like, The Undertaker is like one of my favorite ones, is because he was able to construct this narrative of this very stoic, menacing character that I just really identified with, type deal. And I feel like that's what people are starting to learn when it comes to pit battles now, as opposed to like 2012 where it was much more toxic.
Dude, this conversation is like very heavily tiptoeing around discussions that me and Josh have had about where we think gloving 2 will go, and it's pretty interesting because I'm excited for that conversation whenever we get around to it.
I don't know if that's a conversation for today.
Oh, absolutely not. No, that's a conversation for like a whole entire episode.
Right.
Like I said, gloving 2.
Gloving 2. Electric Boogaloo. Let's see. I feel like we've covered a pretty fair amount of things that we wanted to cover today.
Yeah, I think we talked about the social media platforms. We talked about how we feel about the current state of gloving. It's not. I think there was another thing on there. I just don't remember what it was.
The final one that we would want to really pick up more on would be more so, I guess, the capitalism within gloving in itself and the effects that it's had on gloving. Because like that can go anywhere from like, people paying for resources, paying for lessons, people buying different kinds of technology, because as gloving has gone on, we've gotten different technology, and the marketing of gloving, and that goes into what the stigma is as well, because of how it's marketed and who it is targeted towards. And I feel like that's stuff that we have like been tiptoeing around today, so we could talk about that more.
I would definitely say an entire episode called based around the gloving economy. It can be its own episode. I think we can actually sit there for like a whole hour just talking about that all on its own.
That's unfair.
Yeah, I would certainly say, just from my experience watching how the community has grown and evolved, like with Mason's Light's rise to power and kind of, in my opinion, a little bit of a fall from grace. It's very interesting to see that they strive to get the resources to do what they wanted to do, like have the GGN, have the IGL set up. They have IGC going, and everybody who's been around as long as I have know about Shark Tank. They know about the Shark Tank episode, and that's
Right.
in all honesty, it's like the silent. I don't want to call it the silent killer, but it was the one thing that caused this massive shift to just gloving, just kind of like poofing out and just not progressing any further. You know.
I want to see a Brian Lim light show.
I can send you one.
I want to see it. I want to see a Brian Lim light show.
You just gotta go way back on the Amazing Lives page.
Oh,
It's like it's there. I've seen it.
It's there.
I was like, okay, all right, he's throwing down. Mad respect.
yeah, I've heard that he's good. I've heard that he's actually like not bad.
Yeah, he can move. He doesn't just own the gloves.
he can move.
He
Yeah,
can
it's
wiggle his finger.
at least from my very small point of view at this point, gloving has taken like a really interesting turn, especially since like, you know, I was introduced to it pre-COVID, right? So I watched from the side pre-COVID, and then I started picking it up during COVID. And I think COVID actually played a pretty big part in like creating new glovers, but then also I feel like it created glovers that grew bored, because you know, you'll have glovers that live and thrive off of festivals, meetups, stuff of that nature. And so when COVID hit, you lost all of that for a hot minute. So then those glovers went away, but then you had more bedroom glovers, you know, people like me that came in more of a like, I almost want to say like a lone wolf type scenario where you're learning effectively on your own, but through the aid of the internet tutorials or online communities.
Yeah.
Because at least until recently, like having gotten to go to the DMV meetup for the first time, like first Glover meetup for the first time, hang out with Josh and everyone else, seeing things in person and trading in person and learning things in person, that shit hits way different.
Oh, completely.
So if that's all you knew for like, you know, 3, 4, 5 years of your entire gloving career, I could see how that like could murder your will to want to pursue the art any further.
And you question why you did it. Did you do it for others or did you do it for yourself, etc.?
Right. So I have interesting anecdotes from two sides on that coin, because like for some people, like because like that meetup that you were talking about, it was a brand new experience for several people.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you told me about it, you said like you want to kind of do this more now that you've seen it in person, and you want to get more into it. I had another friend who I called later that night because he kind of just silently dipped, and I was like, hey, like what's going on, like, you know, where'd you go? And he was like, yeah, like to be honest, like it kind of just completely like destroyed like my like perception of like how I glove, because like, you know, I never like, I always just did this kind of for fun, you know, just to show my homies what's up. But then like I saw all these people and they're all good, they're all amazing, and I'm just like looking at myself like it's kind of like, it kind of just made me a little sad inside. But also I told him afterwards like, yo, like don't feel that way. A lot of these guys have been doing this for years. A lot of these guys have been friends for years, trading concepts for years. You have that opportunity now because like you've been introduced to it, you know. And that kind of made him like look up a little bit, like, yeah, you know what, you're right, like I can't be looking at this as a negative thing, because like there were so many amazing shows, there were so many like amazing styles to look at. So I don't know, it's in that regard it's just a perspective thing. But
I feel a little baffled hearing that, because to me, the way, if I was in that person's shoes and seeing that there's this whole world, this whole community of people who share this very common interest about light shows and just have this whole depth and like a rabbit hole within itself, it baffles me that people are intimidated by that. Because to me, I would just be like kid in the candy store. I'd be like, there's a whole world about this that I didn't know about. Like I want to dive deeper into this. Like it's I understand there's the whole social anxiety aspect to a lot of people when it comes to the gloving community, but it shocks me, and it actually kind of scares me a little bit that people are scared away, not, oh my gosh, like Harry Potter, there's an entire magical world that I can go and live in now, and actually be with people who I can relate to and identify with, type deal. Like it's crazy.
I mean, it's a matter of perspective, you know.
Right. I think that friend in particular has like certain self-confidence issues. Right?
That's what I was gonna say too.
Right. Which, you know, is not a problem. But I think one thing that if he chooses to keep coming back and, you know, actually learn and try to progress is that it could actually help with those issues. Because I know for me, gloving is a huge factor in my current like levels of self-confidence and like being comfortable with myself. That actually like helped me like grow as a person, you know. So I don't know. It's all perspective because like I've seen people tell stories of the exact opposite. Like gloving was like kind of like one of the reasons why like they kind of went into like a hole, basically, like why like their life kind of like fell apart, which sounds silly, right? But like, you know, I can see it happening, but it's like it's all a matter of perspective.
That's also probably due to other decisions that they choose to make.
Right. Like, you know, I'm not saying it's like the sole factor, but you know, like it's just what people associate, you know, this hobby with, and like how they just choose to like perceive their reality. But you know, like I said, like hopefully that friend will come back, because he did, after we had that talk, did sound excited about coming back to more. And hopefully
I feel like I know who it is, but I'm not gonna say.
Right.
I have a feeling I know who it is.
So like just hearing it, it's like, to me, obviously I don't know. It's like I would think that the person most likely is like, man, they do it for fun, and they've just not seen it for the first time. People who are having fun but have like a level of seriousness to it.
Right.
So like, I'm sure the person felt like they kind of disrespected the art in a sense, slash themselves, because they're like, it's like, I feel like I should have known this.
I mean, there is a little bit of that, because watching him kind of navigate the space, like he was definitely a little uncomfortable at first. He was like, because like there's certain things that we take for granted, right? Like there's certain things like, you know, don't disrupt the show. If you're gonna doubles like on the fly, like there are certain code of conduct, like how well do you know that person? What's your rapport with that person? If you decide to just give it a chance, give them a tap, you know, are they gonna say no? Like you got to look out for that stuff. You know what I mean? But for someone who's brand new, it's like they're not gonna understand all that and come into like this world where there are a lot of like inherent rules that we kind of have come to understand. Like it's just new, you know. So I kind of feel you there for sure.
I think you could compare this to like this specific situation with this person as a kid who got his first skateboard and he's at the skate park by himself.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there is a level of like stage fright in addition to intimidation as well, because like, you know, people are gonna watch, people are gonna see me, so I don't want to embarrass myself. But then also it's like I'm surrounded by these people who have way more experience under their belt than I do, so how can I nearly compete with this? And obviously a lot of this just kind of branches back into, you know, social anxiety, self-confidence issues and stuff like that. And that's just kind of a speed bump that people will have to overcome when they're participating in any art, especially in art that involves expression, that involves a viewer.
Right, especially because this is a performance art, like there is a lot of like your emotional state highly influences the way that you throw lights. Like
definitely,
if you don't have
Absolutely.
If you don't have a certain level of confidence, people can tell. Like I have this one friend who is an amazing glover. Like he's amazing, but one thing he will constantly do when he's throwing is just say, "Oh, my bad. That's a mistake. Oh, my bad." And like the thing about it is that
wait, I feel like I know exactly.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not gonna say what it is.
We all
do. But then that's the thing, though. If he didn't say a single word throughout that show, I wouldn't have noticed anything. Right?
He did that to me too, and it was really funny. It was yes.
I knew it.
Yes, you know exactly. Yeah.
I love him.
He did that to me too. All 5 minutes, every minute, he's like, "Shit, I didn't mean to do that." And I'm like, "Dude, what are you talking about? That shit was crazy."
I love him.
It's kind of funny too, because you can actually see that in certain people's videos where they are performing and they're like doing their thing, and you see him do this, as they're performing. They are acknowledging that they're messing up, and that's going to me that causes you to start messing up even more because you're now worrying that you just messed up on something while you're in the middle of doing something.
Something I always like to bring up is when it comes to your show, beyond an emotional state, the way I see it, the way you approach a show is typically the same way you approach things in life. You know, like the little details typically come out in your daily patterns as well. So the better put together the person is, debatable, subjective, but you know, the way they are presented is typically the way their show is too. So something to keep in mind.
It's a correlation, not causation.
I would right. Correlation, not causation. But I do see what you mean because, like, you know, Dustin and I talked about this before.
Personality.
Right. Like we've talked about how like a lot of times light shows are like a reflection of like people are. Like you can kind of see like their personality kind of coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are more conscious about it than others. Some people are more like unconscious. Like you can just kind of tell that they're not even
aggressive.
Right. But yeah, like I would say like there's certain people like who throw, and because they're a lot more like into that performance aspect, that they're very good at like manipulating it so that even if it's not their base personality, like they're bringing elements of that entirety of being, like certain elements they wouldn't normally bring out.
Yeah.
Right. And just like being able to manipulate it for that show.
I call that the Freddie Mercury complex, where once they start performing, they feel like they can do anything and nothing can stop them. You know, once they have the audience's attention, they're like, I feel like I can't mess up even if I try. You know, that's what I call the Freddie Mercury complex.
That literally leads into the anecdote of when we were actually hanging out at Josh's after the DMV kickback. Because he is a person that can stay in the zone, which I like highly respect. He can stay in the zone like unflinching. I'm talking. He's trading. You were trading with Fabian, right?
Right.
Yeah, you were trading with Fabian, and like everyone around him, every me, Scotty, Chris, like everybody. We're saying like the dumbest possible things. We're talking about things that we can't really discuss.
We can't discuss. It's just gnarly stuff.
It's all the more important to keep it tasteful.
And it was like 5 minutes straight. He's just throwing, and we're saying all these things, and at the very end, he's like, "Man, I really wish that you guys would just like not talk about this and that while I'm trying to give a show."
No, you're that's not even how it happened. I'm like throwing the show, I finished, and then I look up like, you assholes. I'm trying to throw a light show over here.
Yeah. No, we're basically making toilet jokes the entire time, and he just did not flinch at all while Fabian's just dying laughing.
Right.
And it's like great that like I admire that he can just stay so focused and not break character at all. And it's like, I feel like the moment that people can do that, it allows for them to bring out like this side of confidence that can just kind of exist. And then that eventually forms their online persona.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also think that kind of leads into what I wanted to talk about as well when it comes to like in-person engagements. You know, like you had the friend that was very, started out very uncomfortable about the meetup because it was just like, how do I compete with this? And I really feel like that's something that I think we really need to kind of like break in terms of a mentality when newcomers come in and be like, how do I compete with this? Where it's a meetup, it's not a place to compete with other people. This is a place to actually just learn and share ideas and kind of overall vibe with people, right? And I think it also comes to a part of responsibility on, not saying the host, but just for example, like Josh, since you were the one that was throwing this meetup and you had the friend, just kind of figuring out how to get them comfortable by just having a conversation with them. One of my favorite things from way back in the day were tackle box parties. And to all the new Glovers who don't know what this is, before we got programmable lights, we all had bulb chips, right? We would actually spend a day, maybe 2 days before any event, any festival at somebody's place. with our tackle boxes full of chips, bulbs, diffusers, casings, gloves, all the stuff, everything that you needed where it was in your tackle box. And you would just meet up with everybody, sit down, and start compiling together gloves for that event. And during that time, you would be talking about like your favorite flash patterns, like which bulbs you were really thinking about using, trading bulbs with each other, coming up with custom sets and stuff like that. And then you would go to the event. I feel like that's such a vital part of the gloving community that has been lost, per se, that I feel like really needs to come back, because it gives people a place to talk about things that they really enjoy about gloving that isn't making them feel like they have to compete with people's skill levels. It's just, here are other aspects about gloving that I enjoy. I like the strobe flash pattern. I actually like using the hyperstrobe flash pattern as a flash pattern for very fast dynamic movesets, because since it's such an elongated strobe, it looks really cool in my eyes when you do a lot of whips and flails and stuff with that. And that opens up that level of discussion where people don't feel like they have to sit there and like try to explain their skill level. It's just like, no, these are aspects that I love about it so much that they don't have to work on. You know what I mean? Like, if that makes any sense.
Right.
I love that you brought up that topic, because that's actually like one of my favorite things to talk about. Josh knows, because I introduced him to like my perspective in my world of chips and everything. When we were hanging out, we were up until like 6:30, 7 in the morning, and he had my fucking cryos on for 4 hours of it. 3 hours of it. He was just sitting there, he like lost in it, because it was so like outside of his norm, in a sense.
Right. I will say that set completely changed my perspective on bulbs, and I'm actually like in the process of putting that same set together now, and another one. So.
And it's like the discussion of like flash patterns and color sets and everything. Like that's actually stuff that I do with our friend Jason. Whenever we go over there, like we'll talk about what kind of bulbs we want to use for a video that we're gonna shoot. I'll ask him for his color theory, because color theory, I'm sure you have a good video for it somewhere, Peter.
I have a couple videos. Actually, I have a whole playlist that people can go and check out.
Hey, yeah, he's gonna
somewhere
put it
over
somewhere
here.
Somewhere over there. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, have a whole playlist on color theory. Definitely check it out if you. But I take my understanding of color theory from just general color theory in art and altogether. Like, there's light additive color theory, subtractive color theory. That's kind of pushing more towards like understanding how a printer makes colors. Is using subtractive instead of additive. There's the classical color theory that people know. Yeah, and
I'm a cheater when it comes to color theory. I just look at posters that are super cool.
labeled color wheel, colorblind.
Yeah.
And then what I do is I get shapes, and I'm like, all right, okay, that works. All right, triangle. All right, triadic, quadratic, etc. All those different theories.
Yeah, it's just like, because that within itself is like an entire different culture for gloving as well, like talking about flash patterns and color sets, and then you turn into the even more niche side of that with bulbs, and it's just a lot. It's a lot.
Then you get into whites.
Oh yeah, level of whites, fucking glow. I can't believe they sold out so quick. That was so crazy.
Oh yeah, glow LEDs sold out.
At 3 minutes, sold out 50 mediums. Granted, that's not a lot, but don't worry, bigger shipment coming soon.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see that kind of stuff. But I will honestly say, like talking about the different gloving companies and some of their marks on the community, that's probably more reserved for the gloving economy episode. But
in a different video.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I feel I'm hoping is starting to come more into prominence, is just talking about aspects of gloving that isn't, here's a tutorial, here's a concept, here's a competition, because a lot of the times I feel like that's what most people just have on their minds is concepts, tutorials, competition, and it's just like that's not really the case, and that's not all there is to gloving, and I think that's kind of like a reflection on different platforms as well. Like Reddit, for example, is more casual than GL is, because GL is much more competitive than you would see with Reddit.
Yeah, in order for gloving, in my opinion, to like really take a positive progression, we need to have more like good, meaningful interaction. People need to experience more meaningful interaction instead of like ego boosting interaction, right? Like obviously, like hosting gloving competitions, in-person gloving competitions will definitely drive up engagement, but I don't think that will necessarily culture like as much meaningful and positive what's the word, like experience as one may think. I don't know.
Right.
People like Jest, he literally he had like offered a couple live in-person workshops at his house, and people like didn't hardly show up, stuff like that.
But he lives in undisclosed state in the middle of nowhere, like
But like, we need more of that, though. Is my point. At least, like, that's someone who's in the face. He tried.
Yeah.
Now we need more people to try.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, Dustin, interesting point that you made, because I know that, in my opinion, one thing that I think would actually be like a nice in between pure comps and like just meetups, is like exhibition battles, right? And I know that Michael Horvath has been doing live pit battles where these are exhibition matches, like just inherently set up. But I kind of like that setup more because it's kind of like, going back to that discussion of pro wrestling where almost the battle is not really the point. I mean, it is, right? But the battle is like the spectacle. It's not really about like seeing who's better, but it's a lot more about the spectacle and the drama of the story
of them fighting.
Right, exactly.
Like if they tried this on the other person.
Right, it's like a big ass anime tournament arc, which I think is cool because doing something like that where it's a lot more controlled, where it's like maybe 4 individual matches, it's like in between you still have plenty of time to trade and talk, but you had these little breaks in between where there were like shows that you can kind of catch.
And I think that actually does serve as a good in between for like, if you have strictly like a gloving competition, right? Like that's too serious in my mind in order for people to generate like that kind of like meaningful experience.
Right.
Rather, it's coming from a person who played like a lot of Magic seriously for a long time. Going to play at an open was very different from going to play at an FNM. It was completely different. Like, and that's kind of the comparison that I would have as to having like a monthly meetup to having this big ass competition that people travel from out of state to go to. And
right, because I remember when we used to host like bosses in the East Coast before COVID, there were so many glovers there I just wanted to like meet and hang out with, but everyone was there to compete, so everyone was like a little like almost on edge, right? So I'm like
that tunnel vision.
Right. So
yeah, definitely in that competitive mindset.
Right. And everyone was friendly, but you can tell like they were here for business, and it's like that's not as fun,
So Premier Gloving, another day. Try to do stuff like this. Didn't happen.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the difference between people who really either have the resources to do it or
they do,
or had the will or the intent to do it, which clearly it's the latter that they probably lacked if it didn't happen, if they had the resources, right? Unless poor timing, like who knows,
Right.
But,
I mean, it's
being willing to accept feedback is another thing.
Wait, I remember some of this stuff now.
Like I said, I thought it was like another day, guys.
Yeah,
I would definitely say another topic for another episode would definitely be the state of gloving content. Not just the state of gloving itself, but just the state of content creating for gloving in general, and not just let's talk about my podcast for an hour and a half. Like no. Like I want to talk about Premier Gloving
No, I know.
Entertainment. I want to talk about Jess. I want to talk about Vex's thing. Materia and Youngblood doing the Whip Olympics on Twitch. Like, I want to talk about that kind of content and why we need more people trying. You know. But I think we kind of cover as much as we can. Is there any other quick points?
I think this is a good stopping.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will certainly say thank you to everybody who has been watching. I certainly hope you guys enjoyed what we are attempting here. This is something ideally we want to try to get an episode in once a month. But, you know, we all have kind of chaotic schedules, so we'll try as much as we can to get this to happen and try to do it consistently. But
I know I'm excited for more, so at least in terms of motivation and drive, I think it's here.
Oh,
yeah.
And anyone who does watch, if they have any ideas or topics that they think that we should talk about, that would be great in terms of engagement with you guys, as well as things that we can actually ponder on ourselves.
For sure.
Because sometimes we might miss a point that was supposed to be within the discussion that we have.
Right,
You might have noticed.
Yeah, I definitely will recommend to anyone who's watching this, please let us know your thoughts. What do you guys think about the topics that we did talk about? What do you guys feel about when it comes to the current state of gloving? What do you think are points that we might have missed on that you think are actually really important for us to talk about? You have the wonderful comment section down below to do that. Also, you guys will find in the description links to everybody's social media that they have publicly for their official pages. I know Steamboy has one. Snaps, I believe you also have one as well. And of course, I know Starstream TuT has his own Linktree thing that I can put up. Of course, I don't really think there's any much more that we have to go on that. So once again, thank you guys for watching. I certainly hope you guys enjoyed what we had to say. Please let us know what you guys say. All my social media stuff is linked down below. Please consider donating to my Ko-Fi to help continue with this project. And I certainly hope you guys come back to the next one. But bye.
Put a Rick and Morty reference like right here. A Rick and Morty reference right here in the edit.
I was not in control of that situation at all.
Rick and Morty.
Rick and Morty.
Right here.
100 years.
Son of a
Just
bitch,
something.
I'm in. But alright, bye bye.